In this video, we're going to focus on vocal music from the classical period. Although Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven wrote many beautiful masses, and I should also mention Haydn's oratorios, we're going to focus on one type of vocal piece called opera buffa, or comic opera. The reason that we're going to focus on opera buffa is not only because they were popular, but also because they were a powerful voice for social change during the Enlightenment. The definition for opera buffa is, it's Italian for comic opera, is that it's a genre of opera featuring light, often domestic subjects with tuneful melodies, comic situations, and happy endings. This type of opera was intended for a middle-class audience, not a select group of experts. Remember, with the rise of public concerts and a middle class that was gaining influence, novels, plays, and operas had to be shaped to meet these new demands, these middle-class tastes. The characters in comic opera were more human, often depicting everyday people with everyday feelings. We can see by looking here that opera buffa was normally based on a contemporary subject as opposed to something mythological that you would see in opera seria or serious opera. And again, ordinary people, even lower class people, were featured as opposed to the ancient heroes and gods and so on that you see in opera seria. Because opera buffa tended to move at a quicker pace, this necessitated a new style of singing called the vocal ensemble. And what this allowed for was the depiction of conflicting emotions at the same time. There are many examples of ensemble singing in Mozart's comic opera Don Giovanni. Mozart wrote Don Giovanni in 1787. It was premiered in Prague. Mozart always felt that the Czech people understood his music better than the Viennese. This tells the tale. It's actually an old story based on Don Juan. Don Giovanni tells the tale of this wicked philanderer who tries to seduce as many women as possible, and he ends up murdering the father of one of these women. So he seduces and murders his way across Europe before being pursued and finally dragged down to hell by the ghost of the man whom he's killed. Like the other opera, Marriage of Figaro, that we saw a little bit of, Don Giovanni is implicitly critical of the aristocracy because this wicked philanderer is actually a nobleman. Some consider Don Giovanni to be not only Mozart's greatest opera, but the greatest opera ever written. Technically, this is considered to be an opera buffa, but it's sort of an interesting blend. Some parts are very funny, some parts are kind of tragic, and then, of course, he throws in this walking and talking statue, so there are elements of the supernatural as well. I put a link to the entire opera. I'd love for you to watch all of it, but it is kind of long. At the very least, watch the sections that you have in your book because I think it'll make it a lot more fun for you. So the opera opens with the overture, and we had that as a listening example last week as an example of sonata allegro form because the overture in an opera follows that same kind of form. And then in this chapter, we go straight into Act 1, Scene 1, in which the curtain rises on the comic figure Leporello, who's Don Giovanni's faithful yet reluctant servant. He's standing guard, keeping watch, while Don Giovanni, his master, is inside this big house attempting to seduce this noble woman named Donna Anna. Leporello is complaining about not wanting to be the servant, and when he's done complaining, Donna Anna comes rushing out, chasing after Don Giovanni. She doesn't know that it's him because he's wearing a mask. Anyway, her father, the Commendatore, comes out and ends up challenging Don Giovanni to a duel. And you'll hear what happens. Don Giovanni actually mortally wounds the Commendatore. Craig Wright points out that as soon as he stabs him, you can hear what's called a diminished chord in the orchestra. A diminished chord sounds pretty dissonant because it's built on using minor thirds. So after that happens and the Commendatore is dying, you'll hear the first example of ensemble singing. And this features Don Giovanni, who's watching the Commendatore die, the Commendatore who's dying, and then Leporello who just wants to get out of there. This is a really beautiful passage, and this will end the first part of what you guys have. The other excerpt that you have is from Act 1, Scene 7, in which Don Giovanni decides to seduce Zerlina, who's going to be marrying her fiancé, Mazzetto. The passage begins with Al fin siam liberti, which is a recitative with just a continuo, and it's a dialogue between Don Giovanni and Zerlina, who's supposed to be getting married the next day. He starts his seduction. She's worrying about betraying her fiancé. He tells her that she wasn't meant to be a peasant and flatters her looks. She fears his intentions. He promises to marry her immediately. This then leads to one of the most beautiful duets, which is called La ci darem la mano. This is one of Mozart's best melodies, and Wright points out that it's simple and direct because it's made up of these two four-bar phrases, antecedent and consequent phrases, apt for wooing a peasant. So listen to these excerpts, watch the excerpts on the link that's provided, and better yet, if you can watch the whole opera, I think you'll love it. Also watch, it's a very short presentation from Craig Wright. It's actually very funny. He and some of the students and professors at his school reenact these two scenes for you. They sing them in English. It's very funny, so don't forget to watch that. All right, that's it. Thanks a lot.